welcome to yet another PSP. Today we'll be going over the number 9 ranked team per your preseason power ranking projections. This is a team that is very near and dear to my heart. It is my very own Portland Pioneers. I will be going at this one solo today, which will be a little bit funny given that we are, kind of reviewing my team. But I will do my very best to be objective here and kind of just look at these moves and look at this roster as I would anyone else. So we will start off with kind of a look back at last season. Then known as Zang, this team finished in 11th place with an 8-14 record. Strong start out of the gate. I believe, I want to say I started 6-4 before really going on a pretty nasty tailspin there. I want to say there was a 7 or 8 game losing streak around the middle of the season, and things just never quite got back on track. During the draft, I invested quite a bit in young talent, looking at guys like Roman Anthony and Bubba Chandler, and it took, frankly, both of them a little bit longer than expected to make their way to the majors. The good news for this year is young guys like that are expected to probably start the year with their team, but those aren't the only players. They'll be kind of making regular appearances, so let's quickly go over the ins and the outs for the roster this year. The ins, the Pioneers spent an offseason wheeling and dealing quite a bit, bringing in Dylan Cease, Bryce Terang, Shea Langoliers, Garrett Whitlock, Eugenio Suarez, Connolly Early, and Willie Abreu, who was originally lost via the expansion draft and was then later reacquired from the Sault Ste. Marie Locks. On the way out the door to account for some of those players, we saw Jung-Hoo Lee, Carlos Correa, Teoscar Hernandez, Alex Bregman, Joe Musgrove, Bryce Miller, Yainer Diaz, and Xander Bogaerts. So 7 in, 8 out. A few draft picks going in either direction as well. For some of those, a prospect or two. I guess this is one team where I can speak specifically. My big goal was to get, another more sort of a sure thing in the rotation behind Garrett Crochet, who is obviously, a pretty special pitcher there in his own right at the top of the rotation. But something I felt like last year I really didn't have was that true kind of number 2 guy that I knew I could count on. Again, we talk about those 15 to 20 points, or I guess I should say 25 to 30 points every time they have a start. So Cease was kind of that number for me, and then bringing in a second baseman was kind of my other big mission for the offseason. Christian Campbell was my second baseman going into last year. Things didn't quite work out at second base for him. He had a great start and then kind of tailed off. Don't really know what his position and role looks like on the Red Sox this year. Obviously, he's still a young kid with a lot of talent, but beyond this year, he's unlikely to hold second base eligibility, as he probably won't be playing the position at all this year. So, needed a long-term solution there and went out and got it in Bryce Terang. So, obviously, hard to say goodbye to a few of those players. I traded a couple draft picks to protect Bryce Miller in the draft, but then ended up obviously trading him not too long after. Alex Bregman, of course, will always bring so much consistency there. And Carlos Correa, who's somebody I was actually kind of betting on a little bit of a bounce back. I probably told this story in the Discord once or twice, but the time between the Jeff Passan notification of Carlos Correa has been traded back to the Astros and me going into the waiver wire and adding him to my team, it was definitely less than a minute. I jumped right on that. Just felt like something that would be good for him. And he did have quite a strong second half last year after he returned to the Astros. So we'll see what he looks like this year on Mike's team. But yeah, let's dive into the lineup now. So we will be going over, obviously, a few guys in this lineup that do land on that IBW, the Imaginary Brick Wall Top 1000 Dynasty players. And the first one will appear at the catcher position. That's newly acquired Shea Langoliers, who comes in at number 71 on that list. Spencer Torkelson will be playing first base with Bryce Terang, again, also newly acquired, who ranks at 92 on the list. He'll be playing second base. Matt Chapman out in San Francisco is at third with Francisco Lindor, the shortstop, ranked number 28 on the IBW Top 1000 list. At the infield spot, we'll probably see a Eugenio Suarez, also, again, acquired this offseason. But where, frankly, I think the strength in this team really lies is in the outfield. I had this conversation a few times with people where we thought, boy, outfield's kind of surprisingly shallow. And I feel very happy with this outfield. Roman Anthony, who ranks at number 13, Jackson Churio in center field, who ranks at number 20, and Kyle Tucker in right field, who ranks at number 14. Rounding out the core four there is Willie Abreu in the flex outfield spot. And in the util, you'll see kind of a mix of Red Sox, to be honest. What a shocker. I know. Probably some Trevor Story, a little bit of Caleb Durbin, Marcelo Meyer, and once he makes his way back, probably some Tristan Casas as well. So they will be filtering in there. And in utility as well, we are likely to see Luis Robert Jr., who's similar to Carlos Correa, kind of betting on a little bit of a bounce back given his new environment in his case. So personally, I feel pretty strong about this lineup. Pardon me, I don't think it's over-invested. I definitely feel some trepidation on the corners. Spencer Torkelson had a good year last year, still a young guy at 26, but he's also had some pretty rough stretches. And with, Casas, who is currently on the IL as the only first base insurance that I have, that's definitely something to be a little bit aware of. And then, Matt Chapman is such a great player, but isn't always the best fantasy player. So it'll be interesting kind of to see how the time gets split between him, maybe a little bit of Caleb Durbin, maybe if Eugenio Suarez slides into that third base spot and infield is occupied by one of those Red Sox. So that is where I would say definitely the concern is on those kind of corners and working between the infield. Then also just what is Francisco Lindor going to look like after this hamate repair injury. Moving over to the pitching staff, it is headed off by my hometown friend Garrett Crochet, who ranks at number 15 on the top 1,000. Dylan Cease is in there at the number 2 slot, ranking at number 86, with Brandon Woodruff at the number 3 spot at 81. So 3 guys in the top 1,000 leading off that rotation. Following that, we see Drew Rasmussen, Sandy Alcantara, and Bubba Chandler. Of course, also probably likely to get some regular run in the rotation are Jack Flaherty and Zach Gallen. The pitching staff, not a true sort of top of the line, blow your doors off number 1 closer, but some, in my opinion, pretty solid guys back there in Griffin Jacks, who is pitching out in Tampa Bay now, Raisel Iglesias for the Braves, and then Garrett Whitlock, who is brought over this offseason, will be pitching for the Red Sox. He, for me, is a little bit of a potential X factor. I have my questions about what Aroldis Chapman's season will look like. I think absolutely everything went right last year. He pitched unbelievably, sub 2 ERA out there, but that I think is not what he did for the years leading up. And certainly from the perspective of my hometown team getting wins, I would love to see his repeat of that type of season. But if I think he starts to struggle in the back, Garrett Whitlock is pretty clearly the next guy to step up. So he potentially could step up from, getting holds to getting saves. We could see there. And then in the rotation, high strikeout stuff at the top in Crochet and Cease. Hopefully Alcantara, comes back, I think, stronger in that second year after he returns from TJ. And what does Bubba Chandler look like? He had, frankly, some really phenomenal starts around the end of last year after he came up. He averaged close to 17 per game. I don't actually have the individual splits here. But, he was just up for a few starts there. But really, really solid stuff. So, what does he look like? And then Drew Rasmussen, obviously, Tampa guys are always a little bit of a glass cannon question mark. They produce often unbelievable stuff, which we have seen a ton out of Rasmussen. He's getting the ball opening day for them. And also, they do have a tendency to break down, and so that could potentially test some of the depth of this rotation. So we will move down to the prospects and possible promotions. And this is where we'll actually see something for the first time on one of these lists, where a prospect is not only ranked on the prospect lists, this one is ranked at number 5 on the prospect list, but is actually ranked at number 46 on the overall list. So keeping in mind that this is for dynasty value, so not this year, but who he is as a dynasty player. But Walker Jenkins is ranked at number 46. He's a player I've loved for a long time as a prospect, and I jumped at the opportunity to get him when he was his name was floated out in a trade with Al Martinet last year. The biggest comp for him is Kyle Tucker 2.0. That's what people have been calling him for years now. So you can kind of use that as a reference to, what you might be seeing from him. Pretty good batting average, great power, solid to really good fielding out in the field. Just that five-tool type player. He's probably going to move to a corner, given that they have Byron Buxton out in center field there. But he is Minnesota, and I believe someone pretty special there. He is starting the year on the IL. He's got a grade 1 hamstring strain, so nothing too serious, but that might delay the time it takes for him to get up to the majors for a little bit. The second one is a little bit of a combo deal. It is two Red Sox left-handers who each got about 3 starts in the rotation last year. So I thought it was worthwhile to kind of list them together. Prospects number 24 and 43, Peyton Tolley and Connolly Early. So they, like I said, both lefties, both pretty highly regarded prospects in terms of the Red Sox farm system, and they're both competing for sort of the 5th spot in the rotation along with Johan Oviedo, who coincidentally is also on my roster. So I've kind of got assurance that whoever is in that 5th spot in the Sox rotation, I will have them. Both guys who showed a lot of promise when they came up last year. Tolley as sort of the, you could see him being an ace, but you worry a little bit more that the floor is a back-end reliever. Whereas with a guy like Early, it kind of seems like his floor is a good 4 or 3 starter. He's definitely got that type of stuff and that type of poise, but I would struggle to see him, at his peak moving anything above kind of a 2. To me, he does not have that ace stuff. So a little bit of a high ceiling, low floor, and high floor, low ceiling type combo there. And the last one is Cade Anderson, who was actually taken in the first year player draft. So he's obviously coming out of LSU. Probably a long shot to make the majors. He is ranked at prospect number 46 on the IBW list. But he was the number 3 pick in the MLB draft, number 2 pick in our draft. And, obviously being a college guy, he can be moved a little bit quicker. And if the Mariners need some, help down the stretch, he could potentially make his way up there. So that is a look at the prospects and promotions, and it's time to move on to the record. And I so badly would like to predict myself as a playoff team, but I just can't do it. There are too many good teams in this league, and to be perfectly transparent, I had that little Y next to my prediction, yes, for playoffs, until I got to some of those higher teams, and this squad, I think, just doesn't have the assurance of talent to compete with some of the top guys. So my prediction is a little bit bullish at 12-9. I do think this is going to be a good team this year, and I hope that is objective and not just me, being happy with the product, I kind of put together. But I do have myself just narrowly missing the playoffs, the Pioneers, that is, just missing the playoffs. And, hopefully building towards a brighter future. So that is me, I guess, kind of just going over my own team, and you all get to hear about that. But I hope this was a good review and got, gave you a little bit of info as to what to look for on the Portland Pioneers this summer. We will be back tomorrow with number 8 in our rankings. See you then.
You know what that makes you, Larry?
Lollygaggers.
Lollygaggers.